WNST, Towson, Baltimore. Baseball heating up here as the Orioles in the midst of a huge homestand and Labor Day marathon next week with the hated New York Yankees. And so I'm mixing some stuff up around here, obviously, with not much to discuss until Joe Flacco gets onto the field. And I obviously am following tons of people out on Twitter and Facebook and social media. And, anything media-oriented I sort of get my teeth into, as well as the business of sports. There's a really good website out there and a great place to go for some media reading. Everyone knows Phil Jackman, my dear friend, was the TV repairman here. Awful announcing is America and North America's TV and media repair people there. He is the managing editor at Awful Announcing. He's out in Los Angeles, California, the Orange County area now, but originally a Pennsylvanian. He is a repeat offender here at WNST from time to time. We welcome him back on. Joe Lucia joins us. He is Joe_TOC out on Twitter, and you can follow his work. But, Joe, first off, a good day to you. Happy Labor Day and baseball pennant race, and I know we're all sort of gearing up for the only sport that really matters here, the National Football League, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm pretty amped for college football, pretty amped for the NFL season coming up. So the long summer is just about over, and we can get back to having football in our lives.
Well, I know you guys sort of poke fun sometimes and sort of take a lighter look, as well as a harder look when people in the media are doing things they shouldn't be doing or saying things that they ought not say. In the case of John Saunders, this thing came across my Twitter, and I do follow you guys, and I probably should call you and bug you and have you on the show more often, although I don't really love all the scuttlebutt that goes on in the world of Jay Mariotti, who I once worked for, who I could, I really don't want to discuss this sort of stuff here. But the John Saunders and people like him, and obviously with Dick Schaap represented for people in my life and sports reporters and what that meant. But John Saunders got his, start here. I remember watching him as a kid. We were in the same press boxes when I was an impressionable young guy, and he went on to do all these great things. He loved hockey. I loved hockey. And there was never a time John Saunders didn't make time to come on my radio station or my show or anything we've done here over the last couple of decades. And much like everyone else, I found his death kind of tragic. And there's this book, and I'm a book guy. I'm the last guy like you, Joe, reading books. And you've read the book and wrote a piece about it, and I think it's really sort of interesting, and I think our audience would find it interesting, which is why I reached you. So I'm here on the John Saunders thing, and I know you probably watched him like all the rest of us did, right?
Oh, yeah. I mean, growing up, John Saunders was always on my TV with sports reporters, ESPN and ABC's college football coverage, even college basketball. He was all over the place. And even when way back in the day when ESPN had the NHL, he was he was a face of that coverage, too. So, I mean, John Saunders is the guy who I grew up watched into my adulthood until his tragic passing last year.
So we all know about the tragic passing, and, then there's the book. So give me a little update, bring me up to speed, and, obviously he's one of the reasons, Dick Schaap, and this is all I've ever done, right, is been a sports writer and a book author and, a radio guy and playing around on TV, and, you dedicate your whole life to it. There really are, when the Stuart Scotts and the John Saunders and, when Chris Berman leaves ESPN as he did earlier this year, there's a real changing of the guard and some stuff, but it leaves behind residue, and John Saunders led sort of a whole other life that many of us did not know about watching him on Sunday mornings, right?
Yeah, he was writing this memoir for the past couple of years leading up to his death, and it really wasn't about his career in the media industry, both in the States and in Canada, where he was born and raised, but it was instead about a lot of what he dealt with off the air. He had a bit of a troubled childhood. He was molested as a child. He was beaten as a child. He dealt with physical and emotional abuse from his parents. He dealt with severe bouts of depression. Later on in his life, when he was at ESPN, he fell and suffered a concussion that took him, I believe, like 9 months to recover from. And as soon as he recovered, he had a heart attack. So he had a lot going on that we really didn't know about off the air, because when he wasn't on the air, we were told it was just like a minor thing and he'd be back soon, and no one thought anything more of it. But reading this book, he really details what he was going through, and there was a lot of dark stuff in his life at this time.
I've been in the media circles my whole adulthood since I was 15 years old, and I've gotten to know so many people, and they're guests of mine and friends of mine and beer buddies of mine, and, we shared a memory together someplace, somewhere, and through all these Super Bowls and World Series and All-Star games and Final Fours and spring trainings and owners' meetings and combines and all of this crap that I've involved myself in, and, the depression side of this and the drinking side of this that goes hand in hand with sports where, we write about guys who've had drug problems or have had alcohol problems and media people who've had problems. And obviously, just here in the last week and a half, what's going on with Ryan Russillo, that's become fodder for your audience, fodder for other people. But, you don't see a lot of people writing about these kinds of stories, about the problems that they've had, the addictions, and sort of playing hurt, as, the book says. And this is a really weird time. A lot of people are losing jobs. The industry's shrinking in a lot of ways. A lot of people finding themselves, even where Jason Stark, who's a dear friend of mine and I've known for 2.5, when guys like him don't have work, when Ken Rosenthal is out trying to found who I was an understudy for, and I worked with Kenny at the Sun back in the 1980s and know him very, very well. We were colleagues at Sporting News Radio at the turn of the century and did all-star games together. But, when the best people in the industry are looking for gigs, I think behind it, there's probably a lot of depression and a lot of darkness going on in the lives of many, many media people that we see in front of the cameras, because it's a tough industry right now. It's always been a tough industry.
It really is. And when you look at the case of someone like John Saunders, who was growing up, and he didn't really want to get into this to begin with. It just kind of fell into his lap when his amateur hockey career ended because of injuries. He just kind of started doing radio in Canada and kind of grew out from there. This isn't something that he was necessarily investing his entire life in. He didn't want to grow up and be a broadcaster. It was just kind of thrust upon him after a few years. And there are so many people out there who want to grow up and be a writer or be a broadcaster. And right now the industry is so difficult that there are so many people that are just not being able to do that for a living and having to go on into other things. We see some of the people that got laid off from ESPN. They're no longer writing. They're no longer in sports. They're just moving into other things. And it's really something to keep in mind over these next few months with the way the industry has been going this year so far.
Joe Lucia joining us here from Awful Announcing. They are a great follow-out on Twitter, as well as at awfulannouncing.com. Also, the news editor at The Comeback. You can reach him at Joe at The Comeback, as well as at Joe_TOC, where you'll find some damn good Joe Lucia as well. Hey, Joe, for Awful Announcing, give everybody a little bit of a primer. And I grew up as a media critic myself. I was a rock and roll critic in the 1980s at The Sun, and my favorite columns were Rudy Martzke's column. I was the kid always sending resumes out, trying to become the writer that covered the team that became the columnist in the 1980s. And, I laugh about it with the Armando Salgueros of the world who was on the show a couple of weeks ago, that I almost took his old job in high schools at the Miami Herald in 1987. So this is all I've ever done. And there is a lot of sort of scuttlebutt and muckraking and rumor-rama, and somebody's always got a gun, somebody's always cheating on their wife or drinking too much or getting arrested or getting a mug shot. That's, it's no different than athletes, I think, at this point. But, behind all of that, there is the story of the media and the people that put all this together. And, I think what you guys do there is try to sort of grade the media, who many times, Deion Sanders once said to me, my critics got critics, back when he was a player for the Redskins. And, you guys are the critics of the critics, I guess, right?
Yeah, I think that's a very good way of looking at it. The site launched about 10 years ago, and it's really changed a lot in those 10 years. At first, it was just kind of looking at, silly things and bloopers and that kind of thing. Now we've really evolved into a lot more analysis and news, and we break our own news. We write longer feature stories. So many networks just give us access to their personalities for interviews and profiles and that sort of thing. So it's really changed so much over the last 10 years. And even in the, I think, 6 or so years I've been there, it's really started to change a lot.
Hey, man, I enjoy following you guys. Great to have you on. I'm glad the John Saunders piece sort of caught my eye, and I thought, you know what? I want to talk about that on the radio a little bit because I think you found the book to be compelling. I think everyone in our audience certainly knows a lot about him, and, of course, he lived in Baltimore and was a part of, my childhood. When I broke into the industry in 1984, 85, 86, he was, a sort of a legendary character here even then. And, we didn't have a lot of guys that leave here, and anytime anybody ever left Baltimore and went on to the bright lights, they always took a little piece of Baltimore with them. And John Saunders was one of those guys that always looked like crab cakes to us around here, to some degree, right?
Yeah, absolutely. He was a guy. Baltimore was the only stop he had in America before he went to ESPN. So that is like the market that really he associated with so much down here in the States. And one warning about the book, it is very honest and it can get a little dark at times. So if you're looking for, something kind of uplifting and humorous, it's really not that kind of book. It can get pretty bad at times.
You know what, dude?
So,
I do beach reading that's happy or joyful. I do airplane reading that's serious. You know what I mean? Like if I'm gonna cry or have to really take a deep think to something, I don't want to do it on the beach or at the pool, right? I mean, so there really is a difference, and I do appreciate you pointing that out. And but you did find the book to be really a different kind of book, right? I mean, obviously posthumously too. It's this is something that maybe he wanted to get out while he was alive, but probably would have been very uncomfortable for him then, right?
I mean, if he survived another year or two when this book was released, I think it would have been so much better because he could go on air at ESPN and give interviews to people like you and talk about it and explain what he was going through and what he wanted to accomplish by writing that book and talk about how he needed to get help and how everyone else that might be going through this should get help. Now we're left to tell the story for him now that he's gone. It's a little bit, that much tougher with him no longer here to share his story.
Joe, thanks for coming on and talking about John Saunders. That was real good stuff, and I do appreciate it. Next time we come on, we'll talk about like football season or baseball season or more announcing or other announcing or the business of announcing and all that stuff. But I do appreciate you checking in, and we'll send everybody out to Awful Announcing to see your work, man. Appreciate you.
Absolutely. Thank you very much for having me.
You got it. Joe Lucia. He is the managing editor at Awful Announcing. That's Joe_TOC out on Twitter as well as at The Comeback, where he is the news editor as well. You can find me out on the buyatoyota.com audio vault 24 hours a day from anywhere in the world on your mobile device by downloading the TuneIn Radio app. We do come in crystal clear. Our morning newspaper ships digitally and free of charge to your email inbox each and every morning. It's all brought to you by Planet Fitness and PlanetFitness.com, where it's still $10 a month to get in the best shape of your life. Guaranteed. If there's any breaking news over the weekend, there shall be, with Ravens cuts as well as the Orioles making moves and expanding the roster. You'll get it all first on the WNST text service. That's all brought to you by our friends at Coons Ford, Security Boulevard. And Dennis will be here on Thursday with the SSV on WNST. That's a Sunday sports voice. But it's not heard on Sunday. It's now on Thursday afternoons from 3 until 5 right here at WNST.net. I'm on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, Snapchat, Instagram, streaming live on our Facebook as well as our YouTube WNSTV channel. And much like Mr. Angelos, I am a very available individual. Nasty at WNST.net finds me. We are WNST.net, AM 1570 and WNST Towson, Baltimore, and we never stop talking Baltimore sports.